Hello and welcome. I'm Millicent Walker. Tonight, immediate past Minister of Justice Abubakar Malami and Senior Advocate of Nigeria Festus Keyamo talk tough at the Senate ministerial screening as other nominees rule out their plans before the lawmakers. 4 Turkish nationals kidnapped last week in Kwara State regained their freedom. Police say abductors demanded 400 million and later 100 million naira, but no ransom was paid. President Buhari receives Liberia's highest national honor, restates his commitment to the development of Nigeria and the West African sub-region. And UN official raises alarm over what she describes as international indifference as over 100 people, including 26 children, are killed in the past 10 days.
On Business News tonight, Central Bank clarifies its proposed policy on forex restriction on milk.
On sports news tonight, French League One side Lyon confirmed they are checking the fitness level of former Super Eagles goalkeeper Vincent Yama, who's been missing in action for 1 year.
And from Abuja, Justice John Soho, sworn in by the Chief Justice of Nigeria as acting Chief Judge of the Federal High Court following the retirement of Justice Adamu Kafarati.
The screening of ministerial nominees continued today at the Senate, with the 7 ministerial candidates presenting and justifying their competence to serve in the federal cabinet. This brings the number of those screened so far to 31. At today's screening, the former Minister of Justice and Attorney General of the Federation, Abubakar Malami, explained the reasons for the President's rejection of the Petroleum Industry Governance Bill, PIGB, and why the Office of the Attorney General of the Federation prioritizes public interest. The session lasted for about an hour.
The major thing I think I can do differently by way of ensuring at the end of the day that bills coming from the National Assembly are assented to by the President is to establish a culture of collaboration. A culture of deep-rooted collaboration, for that matter, and not a collaboration as we see it today. Let me cite an example, for example, with a PIB bill. That bill was fundamentally rejected, among others, by the President because of the fact that the interest of the host community was at a point compromised. Compromise in which way? Compromise in the sense that self-serving sections were brought into it, conferring powers on an individual as against the institution. And the public interest element of the role of the President requires that the public interest should be factored more as against public or individual interest. The office of the Attorney General is meant to protect public interest, and where the individual interest conflicts with the public interest, the interest of 180 million Nigerians that are interested in having this country integrated must naturally prevail. And I think that has been very well captured by the Apex Court that has stated in the case of Asari, Alhaji Asari Dokubo versus the federal government of Nigeria, that where an individual interest conflicts the public interest naturally prevails.
Another ministerial nominee drilled by the senators is the Director of Publicity of the Buhari campaign organization and Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Mr. Festus Keyamo. He told the lawmakers that if he is to be appointed to work as the Attorney General and Minister of Justice, he would decongest the Supreme Court, the prisons, and the justice system.
Distinguished colleagues,
I'll be prepared to serve in any capacity that the President wants me to serve. But if I'm AGM, I have what the idea I call the 3 Ds that would be at the heart of judicial reforms, the 3 Ds. And the first D is the decongestion of the Supreme Court. The second one will be the decongestion of the prisons. And the third one will be the decongestion of cost lists in courts across the country. And that is, of course, linked directly to speedy trials. Now, as to the decongestion of the Supreme Court, I would not occupy the office of AGF for 4 years without unbundling the Supreme Court. That would be my first task, to unbundle the Supreme Court. Our Supreme Court is the busiest Supreme Court in the world. And it's just not acceptable. So there's something wrong about that system. In constitutional matters, I would press for constitutional amendment to make all the 21 justice seats. Because that's our ground norm. The constitution is our ground norm. So 4 people cannot determine our ground norm, where 21 are there. And then we're all bound by that. These are things that are wrong with our Supreme Court. So I will make a holistic unbundling of the Supreme Court and complete restructuring of the Supreme Court. The congestion of prisons, which is the second D, is that we are not complying with provisions of the law. I want to pay tribute to the 7th Assembly that passed the Administration of Criminal Justice Act. If you look at the provisions of the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, provisions have been made there, adequate provisions, to address the congestions of our cells and our prisons. For instance, every police station in every part of this country should open its cell to the nearest magistrate court at regular intervals for the magistrate to just come and say, open your cell, I want to see who are those you are detaining here and why you are detaining them. The provision is there. The DPOs are supposed to make returns to the magistrate. So say, look, we have arrested this person, we are detaining them for this reason, and all and all. They're not complying with those provisions right now. Nobody's complying with those provisions. Now, for states that have not adopted the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, the scandalous situation we see now is that a person is arrested on a frivolous charge, arraigned in court on a supposedly capital offense. Once the magistrate court says murder, armed robbery, even without a proof of evidence attached, they just say remand. We must amend the law and encourage state governments across the country to amend their criminal procedure acts or codes to ensure that at the point the magistrate is entertaining the charge against those accused persons, instead of sending them to remand, the magistrate should have powers to call for proof of evidence at that stage.
Other nominees screened by the Senate today are former Deputy Governor of Plateau State, Mrs. Pauline Talon, Mr. Ali Fantami, Mr. Maigari Denyadi, former Aviation Minister Hadi Sirika, and Mr. Osage Ohanire, who also served as former Minister of State for Health. The 2 former ministers also spoke on their competence.
To discuss. Once I was in charge of aviation as Minister of State, Aviation in the Ministry of Transportation, I had a course to take a decision to close the only runway that we have here in Abuja. That didn't go down well. Many people, including professionals, technocrats, politicians, and as true speakers on behalf of the Nigerian people and the custodian of the law of the land and the makers of these laws of land that we follow, you had the wisdom to invite me 3 times and for a record 9 hours to discuss and iron out those concerns to close that single runway for all of the consequences that were then anticipated. However, through your guidance and through those exercises, we were able to together see the end of that project on time and on budget.
The primary healthcare center is truly the bedrock and the foundation of healthcare everywhere. It is emphasized in the Astana and also the Alma Ata declarations and in the strategic development goals STG 3. It is true that building primary healthcare centers is a favorite let's say, constituency project of honorable members and senators. In fact, I also use this opportunity to appeal that building such structures for primary health care should be in consultation with the Ministry of Health to tell you exactly where they are needed. And you also need a special design. It cannot be just any house. And then the location also has to be properly selected in order for it to be of best service.
The screening for the remaining 12 ministerial nominees will continue Monday, July the 29th. Let's turn our attention now to other stories, this time security. 4 Turkish nationals abducted in Kwara State last weekend have regained their freedom. The Commissioner of Police in the state, Mr. PIGB, said the Turkish construction workers were freed after 2 of the suspected abductors were apprehended. He explains that no ransom was paid for their release, although the sum of 400 million naira was demanded by the abductors, which was later reduced to 100 million. The 4 Turkish nationals were abducted at a relaxation center in Kwara State. Meanwhile, 2 persons have been reported killed and several others wounded when Boko Haram fighters raided a camp for the internally displaced in Borno State. Channels Television gathered that dozens of Boko Haram fighters on motorcycles and 2 motorized rickshaws stormed into Dalori camp on Thursday, shooting people and looting food supplies after overrunning a nearby military base. Dalori is about 15 kilometers from regional capital Maiduguri, housing about 50,000 people. Eyewitnesses say the insurgents attempted to invade the capital city, but diverted to the camp located near the city gate, having met strong military resistance. Staying with security matters, the president of the Christian Association of Nigeria, CAN, Reverend Samson Ayokunle, calls on President Muhammadu Buhari to ensure the release of Dapchi schoolgirl Leah Sharibu and aid worker Grace Taku and other persons abducted by Boko Haram terrorists. The cleric made this call in a statement, adding that any government that cannot guarantee the security of its people loses the confidence of its citizens. The CAN president's statement comes after a video surfaced in which Grace Taku, a staff of Action Against Hunger, pleaded with the government and CAN to release her alongside 5 of her colleagues from the custody of the terrorists. He expressed confidence that Leah Sharibu is still alive and challenged the government to free her and other persons still in captivity. The statement adds, quote, "We call on well-meaning people and agencies to wake up from their slumber before it will be too late. Our prayer is that the awesome God will come to the aid of this country," end of quote. He also prayed that God will free all the captives and comfort families of those whose relatives have been killed across the country. In the meantime, the Inspector General of Police, Mohammed Adamu, has ordered the beefing up of security in all the states of the Federation, including the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. The spokesperson of the Nigeria Police Force, Mr. Frank Mba, explained in a statement that the action comes in view of the violent protests by members of the Islamic Movement of Nigeria. The members of the group are demanding the release of their leader, Sheikh Ibrahim El-Zakzaki, who has been in detention since 2015, following their clash with the Nigerian army in Zaria. The police chief has given an assurance that proactive measures, including aerial surveillance of major cities, have been in place to ensure the safety and security of lives and property for all Nigerians. Zonal Assistant Inspectors General of Police and Commissioners of Police nationwide have also been directed to ensure adequate security arrangements to check the criminal activities and threat to public peace. In part 2, after the break, President Buhari gets Liberia's highest national honor as the country marks its 172nd independence anniversary. Please stay with us.